Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem. Chaf Zayin Tishrei Tavshin Pevav. Since this is the beginning of the cycle of reading the Chumash, we're going to speak about the mitzvah of Shnayim Mikra Targum. The Gemara says in Masechta Brachos and Avches, Amar of Huna bar Yehuda Amar of Ami, La'olam Yashlim Adam Parshiyosav Imatzibor Shnayim Mikra Targum. Person should always complete the parsha with the tzibur, twice the psukim, once the targum. Va'afilu ataris v'divayin, even mere names of cities. Shekal hamashlim parshiyos v'matzibur ma'arichin loy yamav v'shnaysav. Anyone who completes parsha with the tzibur, they lengthen their days and years. So the first question is it dafka targum? Why not Rashi? Is the Gemara mashma that Rashi is not good enough? Because the Gemara only says targum. The Gemara doesn't say Rashi. Yehuda's saying, but Rashi wasn't born yet. So is Rashi a valid substitute? Is Rashi lechatchila? Is Rashi b'diavad? That's a major question. In other words, bizman hazeh, what is better, Rashi or Targum? Rashi or Targum? The lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is that. Now, first of all, it's very interesting. The lashon of the Gemara is la'olam, forever, really. Does that imply obligation? No. La'olam sounds like, you should always try to do it. If you look in the Torah, though, the Torah says tzarech, you need to. If you look in the Shulchan Aruch says chayev. It's obligatory. It's obligatory. So that's a lesson in reading the Gemara. Because when the Gemara says la'olam, you see from the Shulchan Aruch, la'olam means you have to do it. It's an obligation. What if you do it during Chazar Sashatz? No problem. Then you have to do it again. You'd have to do it to mitzvah ba'avera. You're not allowed to do anything during Chazar Sashatz. You can't even collect tzedakah. They should not collect tzedakah during Chazar Sashatz. You cannot, the same way you wouldn't be Maver Sedra during your silent Shemona Esrei. Imagine the guy in the middle of silent Shemona Esrei. I don't know what he's being Maver Sedra, middle of the smart. He's up to Rifa'enu, and in the middle, he breaks for Maver Sedra, or he breaks to say Tehillim. Say, pal, you lost it. So you're not allowed to be Maver Sedra during Chazar Sashatz. Anyway, I once had a big shaila. I have a guy, he made a siyum during the 9 days. The only thing is, I know he learned the Masechta during Chazar Sashatz. Anyway, so we're going to talk today about a few important things. When is the optimum time to finish the Parsha of the week? So, there's a very interesting stira in the Mishnah Berurah regarding when should you be Maver Sedra v'zois habracha. The Mishnah Berurah says regarding Hilchos Hoshana Rabbah that Maver Sedra of v'zois habracha you should start the night of Hoshana Rabbah. Elsewhere in Siman Reish Pei Hey, I believe, the Mishnah Berurah says you should do it the night of Simchas Torah. So when is the earliest time to be Maver Sedra v'zois habracha? Are you supposed to do it Dafka Hoshana Rabbah or Dafka Simchas Torah? Or are you allowed to start it as soon as they start learning v'zois habracha by Mincha, which is already Shabbos Shuvah, they start v'zois habracha? If I'm going to start the first Hoshana Rabbah night, it's not really enough time to do it Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum. So they asked Rabbi Yashiv, because if I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Yashiv was being Maver Sedra already starting from Shabbos Shuvah, and they asked him, what about the Mishnah Berurah? And Rabbi Yashiv says, the Mishnah Berurah just means not that you can't start earlier. Of course you could start earlier. The Mishnah Berurah means is you should not do it later, meaning don't wait until Simchas Torah day after they've already lain the Zois HaBracha and then finish the Zois HaBracha. Says Rabbi Yashiv, the whole purpose of being Maver Sedra is to be able to pay attention carefully to the Kriyas HaTorah with Havana. The purpose of Maver Sedra is to listen to Kriyas HaTorah with Havana. By the way, Kriyas HaTorah is another time that people like to do different activities. People like to read Parsha sheets. Parsha sheets, it is prohibited to read Parsha sheets during any time of the davening. The only time you can read Parsha sheets is when they sell aliyos. Or, if you finish Shemona Esrei and they're not yet up to Chazar, you could read Parsha sheets. Otherwise, take them off the table and put them on the bima, put them in Geniza. There's no, unless that's your ikar learning of the week. Let's say, in other words, you're not able to learn, and the only thing you're able to do is read parsha sheets. Okay, so read the parsha sheets. What can I tell you? You cannot read parsha sheets during davening or during Kriyas HaTorah. The ikar limud HaTorah of a Jew is Kriyas HaTorah. It's a takana of Moshe Rabbeinu to learn Torah b'tzibur. It's Talmud Torah b'Rabbim. It's the ikar Talmud Torah the whole week.
What about starting Bereshis like this past week?
Okay, before
Bracha?
No, you can't. You can't. The tzibur didn't start that yet. Also, they didn't start reading it by mincha.
Well, they did it on Simchas Torah.
On Simchas. So once they start on Simchas Torah Bereshis, you could start Bereshis, but you can't start at the beginning of the week, even though it doesn't leave a lot of time. Now you're allowed to learn the parsha.
Sure.
Just will it count as Shnayim Mikra? It's premature. Would you have to do it again? I don't know. It's a good shaila. Okay, so Rabbi Yosef says that the tachlis of Maver Sedra is to be able to pay attention to Kriyas HaTorah. Therefore, of course you're allowed to start it as soon as the tzibur starts reading Bereshis Shabbos by Mincha. What the Mishnah Berurah means is, don't do it later. You want to get it done before they read V'zois HaBracha Simchas Torah morning. So either Hoshana Rabbah night is your last chance, or Simchas Torah night is your last chance, l'chatchila. Of course, b'diavad, you'd be allowed to read it the whole day on Simchas Torah, even though they've already started reading Bereshis. You'd be allowed to read V'zois HaBracha the whole day. Now, I want to share with you a chiddush. I don't know that it's, I don't know if it's lahalacha l'maisa. I want to share with you an interesting chiddush. We know that b'diavad, if you were Maver Sedra on Shabbos, you have until the end of Tuesday. Why? Because as long as you could still make Havdalah, you're still within the window of being Maver Sedra. Of course, b'diavad, if let's say you were Maver Sedra the whole year and you read all Chamishe Chumshei Torah, Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum on Shmini Atzeres, b'diavad it's okay. But that's b'diavad. But b'diavad, you have until when you could still make Havdalah. Now, there's a very interesting Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says that even though for Shabbos you have 3 days to make Havdalah, for Yom Tif you do not have 3 days to make Havdalah. You have to make it that night. You cannot be Mashlam Havdalah on for 3 days. However, says Rabbi Kiva, you could make Havdalah for 1 full day. It's not a din of Hashlama, it's still Ikar Zman. Rabbi Kiva brings the chiddush. Now, there is an opinion that we don't hold like, quoted in the Shari Tshuva, that you have a whole week to make Havdalah after Yom Tif. We don't paskin that way. We paskin, if you didn't make it within day 1, you can no longer say it with a bracha. Okay? But within day 1, it's still considered Ikar Zmana. Perhaps then, the same way b'diavad, you could be Maver Sedra for 3 days after Shabbos. Maybe if you weren't yet finished Chamishe Chumshei Torah on Wednesday, by Wednesday, maybe you had a whole Thursday to still do it. According to Rabbi Kiva that you could make Havdalah for a full day. Or maybe we'll say, once you started Bereshis, you're toast. Bereshis is the final deadline. Another chiddush, an even bigger chiddush, so I'm just saying that lefil pula ba'alma, I never found anywhere that you would have an extra day to be mashlam v'zois bracha. An even bigger chiddush, which I certainly never found anywhere, is that what if Simchas Torah falls out on Shabbos? Then you could make Havdalah for 3 days. So could you then have an extended 72 hours to finish being Maver Sedra? I'm not sure. I think...
Oh, no, I hadn't.
Did we ever have Simchas Torah on Shabbos?
No, I hadn't. Sunday.
Or Shmini Atzeres on Shabbos. Could you have Shmini Atzeres on Shabbos?
Yeah, I thought that.
Yeah. So then you can make Havdalah for 3 days, out Shmini Atzara, out Shabbos. Okay. I want to talk about another interesting thing. So we said that according to Rabbi Yashiv, the inyan of being Maver Sedra is to dafka do it l'chatchila before the laning on Shabbos. Okay, but the Mechaber says mitzvah min hamuvchar sheyashlam oisa koidem sheyoichal b'Shabbos. Mitzvah min hamuvchar is to finish it before you eat on Shabbos. Says Mishnah Berurah, b'chidi isa b'medrash shetziva Rebbe esbanav. Rebbe commanded his children, al toichlu lechem b'Shabbos ad shetigmru es kol haparsha. Do not eat bread on Shabbos until you finish the whole parsha. So what do you do on a Shabbos like this Shabbos? Which I had this dilemma. There's very little time to do Bereshis. Now, by the way, we've had less time to do Bereshis. Sometimes Simchas Torah is on a Thursday. Then you're really toast. Bereshis is like one of the longest parashiyos. Comes the end of davening, you weren't Maver Sedra yet. Should you delay your Shabbos meal until 2 p.m., 1 p.m. to finish Maver Sedra? Or should you delay it at all? Or should you eat at a kiddush before your Maver Sedra? So the Mishnah Berurah says like this. When we come...
Staying on Friday night.
It's interesting. The lashon of the Mechaber is mitzvah min hamuvchar sheyashlam oisa koidem sheyoichal b'Shabbos. So good, so Rabasi wants to know, is that before you eat Shabbos day or before you eat Friday night? If you look in the Magen Avram, he brings from that Rizal, l'chatchila yashlim erev Shabbos. Maybe that implies that you should finish before you even eat Friday night. However, if you look in the Arzarua, the Arzarua says that the reason why you should be Maver Sedra before you eat is because you might get so caught up in eating, you'll forget to be Maver Sedra. The Lashon Arzarua is Chayshinan shemitoch riboy achila lo yikra kalal. So that the poskim say is mashma, it's dafka eating Shabbos day. It's not eating Friday night, because even if you eat so much Friday night, you're not going to forget to be Maver Sedra b'chlal. You could be Maver Sedra the next day. So the Arzarua indicates that the inyan, it's not asr, the inyan of finishing being Maver Sedra before achila is achilas hayoim and not achilas halayla. Now, it's pointed out, according to that, are you allowed to eat before you make kiddush? Are you allowed to make kiddush before you Maver Sedra? Yes. You could make kiddush before you Maver Sedra. The Reb Chaim Noah says, Yachal lechal koidem sheyikra Shnayim Mikra v'echatar. You could make kiddush. Why? Because the whole reason why you shouldn't eat before Maver Sedra is you might eat so much that you'll get caught up and you'll forget to be Maver Sedra. But that's only achila, that's not te'ima. However, Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes in the Tshuva, in the Shelas Yavitz, that the din of not to eat before Maver Sedra is even te'ima. And the reason for the inyan is rizus, that al zrizus you should be finished being Maver Sedra before you even do te'ima. It's interesting, if you look in the Piskei Tshuvos, which Piskei Tshuvos is a wonderful encyclopedia on the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah. However, it is primarily working with Hasidish Piskei Halacha. So in a lot of yeshivas, they don't make use of it. But he says, Piskei Tshuvos, he comes out, when the Mechaber says mitzvah min hamu. Now I would say the Shulchan Aruch is mashma, you are allowed to make kiddush before you Maver Sedra. Because the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is, mitzvah min sheyasham oisa koidem sheyoichal b'Shabbos. Says, the lashon of the Mishnah Berurah is Kanievsky shetziva Rabbi Zbanav al toichlu lechem b'Shabbos. Don't eat bread. He didn't say don't eat kiddush. He said don't eat bread.
It doesn't help if you don't understand the laning and that whole beginning of the show.
All right. So according to the Rebbe Yashiv's svara, that you're supposed to do it. Now it's interesting, right? The lashon is. Right, according to Rabbi Yashiv, that the inyan is you want to go into Kriyas HaTorah having a yediyah of the parsha, so that you're not mekayim that. But you are fulfilling the medrash that Rebbe commanded his children, al toichlu lechem b'Shabbos ad shetigmros kol parsha. Now the Mishnah Berurah says, listen to this, that pashut, don't push off the meal on Shabbos past Chatzos to finish being Maver Sedra, because the inyan of being Maver Sedra for the meal is only mitzvah ba'alma. The inyan of eating the Shabbos meal is a chiyuv. You have to eat the Shabbos meal before Chatzos. And therefore the Mishnah Berurah says, if you didn't read Shnayim Mikra on Erev Shabbos, try to get up early Shabbos morning to finish the Parsha Shnayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum. In fact, the lashon of the Talmidei Rabbeinu Yoina on the Gemara Brachos is Koidem Kriyas HaTorah b'Shabbos b'Tzibur Tzarech Lekroisa Ba'atzmai Shnayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum, and that's the way the Aruch HaShulchan also says it, which is the way we said it from Rabbi Yashav, that the inyan is not before you eat, the inyan is before Kriyas HaTorah. By the way, also the Torah says mitzvah midcha sheyashtem leiser kodem sheyochel b'Shabbos. Okay, so it seems like the most lechatchila thing is to try to finish it before laning, or if not that, at least before you eat. And of course, if you didn't do that, you should try to finish it before the end of Shabbos. Obviously, this past week, it was somewhat difficult to do that.
Simchas Torah actually falls on Friday. Then even less time.
Last year.
It would be
Yeah, then you have even less time. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now, I want to talk about the best way to do it. If you look in the Shulchan Aruch says that Shnayim Mikra Ve'echad Targum, and then Im Lamad HaParsha B'Perish Rashi, Choshev K'may Targum, V'Yirei Shamayim Yikra Targum, V'Gam Perish Rashi. Now, which one is better, Targum or Rashi? If you look in the Bir Halacha, he says the Beis Yosef writes in the name of the Smag that Rashi is better than the Targum. And that sheet is brought in the Mordechai and the Hagois Maimoni, and says the Beis Yosef, no, that the Smag himself said that this did not seem to be correct to the Ri and Rav Amram and Rav Natrunai, that they hold the Targum is better because Targum was given Misinai. Therefore, Yirei Shamayim Yotzei is Kulam, V'Yikra Targum, V'Gam Perish Rashi. That's the Beis Yosef. But let's talk about Lamaisa. Which one is better? There's this great debate. Some say Targum is better because Targum was given Misinai. Some say Rashi is better because Rashi you could understand.
Rashi's not in every pasuk either.
Right, that's true. Rashi is not on every pasuk. The Bir Halacha's conclusion is, Ein lanu poisek mefayrash sheyizbar da Targum chashav tveim perish Rashi. No poisek explicitly says Targum is better than Rashi besides the Beis Yosef. But because there are many words and there are many psukim that we don't have Rashi, so then all you're going to get is Mikra, and the Targum gets every pasuk. That's the advantage of doing both. But what if you're only going to do one? In other words, me'ikar hadin, right? Me'ikar hadin, you only have to do one. The Gemara doesn't say you have to do both. What is better lamaisa? So I want to share with you something very interesting. Mi she'enoi, this is from the Sefer Gam Ani Oidcha of Rav Gamliel Rabinovich, not to be confused with Rav Gamliel Rabinovich. Okay? Usually when people say Rav Gamliel Rabinovich, they mean the Mekubal, the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva Shar Shamayim, not him. I think it's his nephew. Okay? He wrote a set of a psalm called Gam Ani Oidcha, with a bunch of questions. Mi she'enoi mevin Targum. Someone who doesn't understand Targum. Im adov she'yilmoid Rashi. Says Reb Chaim Kanievsky, loy plug, v'af al pi she'enoi mevin tzarech loymar Targum. If you don't understand it, you still have to say it. They asked Rav Yosef Lieberman. He says Targum. They asked Rav Nebenzal. He says the Machlokes. They asked Rav Mazuz. He says no. Targum yesh soidos gedolim b'chachma amuka. They asked Rav Schlesinger. He said Rashi loy ba b'makom Targum ela lahoisef ala Targum. Yesh lahak b'likroi Targum. What do I know? Ma'ani, I'm mamish afar tachas all the ragleim. I think the Chofetz Chaim fundamentally disagrees, and the Chofetz Chaim says you must do Rashi, and Rashi has supplanted Targum in our times. How do I know that? I have a sefer of letters from the Chofetz Chaim. It's called Kol Kisvei Chofetz Chaim, and I wrote down in the front page, then on page Mem Ches, these are the holy words of the Chofetz Chaim. V'hinei ikar halimud shel mikra hulimud parshas hashavua im Rashi. The ikar learning of Chumash is Chumash with Rashi. Isa b'arches Chaim l'Rabbeinu Harash shetziva lebanav lomaid parshas hashavua im perish Rashi. V'loi k'may shenoigim b'harbi mekaymois, that the rabbi learns with the people the parshas hashavua, and then he says some kind of drush on the parsha, and he's marach in the drush, and he talks about jokes and politics and stories. Shalai hayav loy nivra. The stories never happened. Even the guy who said it knows he made it up. Usually the rabbi only talks about one little episode in the parsha, and then he assumes that the people are going to learn the rest of the parsha on their own. Lo yizuhi adarach shalimud amikra. A person will say, Ani mavra sedja Shnayim Mikra Targum, uveze Yotzei ani yidei chayvasi, lo yichein hadavar. Only in the times of the Gemara you're Yotzei with Targum, says the Chofetz Chaim. Ki b'zman ha-Gemara haya oz ha-Targum limud gadol v'nichmad, shal yadoi hevinu ha'amonas ha-Torah, ma she'en kein etzleinu b'yameinu enu, Ein anu yoitzim yidei chayvasenu betargum. You're not yoitzei Shnayim Mikra with Targum. Why? Lefi she'ein hamoinei achinu b'nei Yisrael mevinim oisai. People don't understand it. Utzrichim anu lebiur nichbad sheyifarish heteves ha-Torah. We need an honorable perush. Ubiur kazeh hu Rashi vu etzleinu midina. Midin, you're obligated to learn with Rashi. B'mokoim ha-Targum instead of Targum. That's a big chiddush. Says the Chofetz Chaim, Bizman hazeh, if you do it twice with Chumash and once with Targum, lo yatsa. Could you do Rashi instead? You're obligated to do Rashi instead.
You have to say Rashi.
I'm going to get to that. Okay, so that's now, he didn't write this in the Mishnah Berurah. What year did he write this letter? Let's see. I don't know. It's called Maimer Das Torah. The Chofetz Chaim says, if you do Shnayim Mikra ve'echad Targum, lo yatsa.
I don't know the context of the letter. Maybe you wrote it to specific.
ER Taf Reish Pei Tes, 1929. You're right. We don't know the content. He wrote it to Jews. So let's say, if you live in South Korea, you don't have to do it with Rashi. What? Iker halimud shel mikra mashenkin etzleinu, us.
Nowadays, it's a person to a person.
No, he doesn't say to you, to Pliny, to Almoni, Yankel Beryl. Ein anu yoz nechvazal v'she'ein hamoinei achenu v'sam mavinu moisai. V'hu etzleinu midina. Es kol zeh matzes linchotz lemoid lezaris es achenu beis Yisrael. The Jewish people. You're right. Non-Jews don't have to do it with Rashi. They could do it with Targum.
No, but it's interesting he said b'makom, he didn't say in addition.
No, and he doesn't say in addition. He says instead of. Now, could you rely on Reb Chaim Kanievsky? Yeah, why didn't Reb Chaim bring this? I can't tell you. I don't know. Mishnah Berurah didn't bring it. What year was the Mishnah Berurah written? Chela Gimel? I don't remember. What year was Chela Gimel written? I would say earlier. I would say earlier.
That's Be'er Halacha.
Also earlier than 1929. Yeah, for sure. The Chofetz Chaim passed away in what?
33?
Yeah, something like that. I think Chilek Gimel was written well before that. Chilek Gimel was written before that. Now why didn't the Mishnah Berurah change it? Mishnah Berurah had a policy that there were a lot of things that came to his attention after, and he said if this was the hashgacha, he left it. He left it like that. But this is what he wrote.
That's not how Allah says it.
Ein anu yotzim midei chayvaseinu b'targum. Anyway, that's an interesting one. Rabbi Chaim says no, Targum not only Yotzei, it's better. It's better. Rabbi Chaim says it's better. I like Rashi. I'm related to Rashi. Probably so are you, but you know. Okay, now let's talk about when you learn Rashi, or if you do, do you have to say the words? Now, if you learn Targum, do you need to say the words? Yeah, l'chayra, you have to say the words. But what about if you learn Rashi? Do you have to say the words? If I'm not mistaken, okay, in the Piskei Teshuvos he brings V'yachal lilmoid perish Rashi ketzad sharoitzeh. We have, by the way, a testimony here of somebody who saw how the Chofetz Chaim was Maver Sedra. He did it with, one second, this is Oyem V'Noira, let's see if I can find it, that the Chofetz Chaim not only did Rashi, the Chofetz Chaim did Ramban, and the Chofetz Chaim did the whole parsha in one sitting, which is a pretty impressive feat. And he did it pasuk by pasuk. So in other words, he did a pasuk, he did Rashi, he did the Ramban. That's something that could take about 5 hours. If you do the whole parsha, Shnayim Mikra, Echad Targum, Rashi, Ramban, minimum 5 hours. This is what we have, a eyewitness account of somebody who saw the Chofetz Chaim. But let's talk about if you need to say the words. So in the Piskei Teshuvos, he brings down that you could learn Rashi however you want. You could read it after each pasuk and then do Rashi, or you could finish the whole Shnayim Mikra Targum and then do Rashi. V'dai shaloimed b'machshavtai. The Piskei Teshuvos brings, it's enough to think it in your mind. However, of course, it's always better to say it with out loud, like the Gemara says in Erevin, that you should always try to say your learning out loud. Okay, so the Piskei Teshuvos brings down, you do not have to say the words of Rashi. If I'm not mistaken, in the new edition of the Piskei Teshuvos, he brings down a dissenting view that you should say the words of Rashi. Obviously, you have to understand. For sure, Rashi, you would for sure have to understand.
Let's say it's a dictum or no nitbal, so you don't. You're much better off with Targum than Rashi because you're not going to get that. All these interesting Rashis that talk.
There are not that many, and usually you get the basic gist.
Is the basic gist enough?
Yeah, the basic gist is enough. But if you don't understand, if you're reading it like it's Chinese, then for sure Targum.
Some of them are definitely there.
There are tools today that you could crack any Rashi pretty easily, you know? So let me see if I can find this for you. Okay. Im tzarich, this is from the Sefer Gam Ani Oitcha. Im tzarich loymar Rashi bepiv. So the Shaila, Shulchan Aruch Kasav Yirei Shemaim Yikra Targum Agam Perish Rashi, Him Tzarich Loimer HaPerish Rashi Davka Bepiv, Oisagi Shemahar Belibai. They asked Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Reb Chaim Kanievsky said Bepiv. Now you don't know if that means to be Yotzei Shnayim Mikra or any limud should be Bepiv. They asked Hagoyin Rev Shatzigal? Shin Sadi Streichel Yud Gimel Lamed. He brings from Reb Nissen Karela, said, you could think it. They asked Rav Lieberman, he says, Limud Rashi hu begeder limud, ve'eno begeder kriya, l'chein yesh le'din Talmud Torah. And we know, but that means, your Yotzei the mitzvah beherher. They asked Hagoyin Rav Feinhandler, so he said, it's not a question about Rashi. What about Targum? Is it enough to think it? He says, no, it's not enough to think Targum. And just like it's not enough to think Targum, it would not be enough to think Rashi. The bottom line is, there are a number of opinions that when learning Rashi, Rashi is not begeder kriya, it's begeder limud, and it would be enough to think it. Certainly it's better to say it, but it would be enough to think it. Anyway, these are some interesting inyanim when it comes to Shnayim Mikra.
So is it any other Rishon or just Rashi?
It could be any Rishon, l'chayra, but Rashi is the best way to do it. You want to know, let's say I did Rashi a number of times. This year I want to do the Sfarno. I had that Shaila this year. I couldn't bring myself to not to do Rashi, and then unfortunately there's not enough time to do. Here, let's read the lashon of the Mishnah Berurah. He says, Rashi is chashav k'may Targum. V'al ken yotzei b'mashakar Shnayim pam Mikra v'echa perish Rashi. V'oisam psukim she'en aleim perish Rashi yikra oisan shalosh pamim. Mi she'enoi bar hachi she'yavan as perish Rashi. Ra'oi likrois b'perish haTorah sheyesh b'lashon Ashkenaz b'zmanenu. Kagoin tsena ura'ena b'kiyoytz b'zeh. Ha'mevarim es ha'parsha al pi perish Rashi u'shar chachamenu zal ha'benuyim al yisoid ha'talmud. Basically, if you can't understand Rashi, read something in the vernacular, like tsena ura'ena. There's a famous joke that they say about a rabbi that every week after his drasha, the ladies in the shul said, Rabbi, you're such a good speaker, but you must get your drasha from the tsena ura'ena. The tsena ura'ena is like what the ladies used to read on the parsha. It's a collection of all the midrashim. Maybe, it's like a medrash says for. So anyway, the rabbi said, I never look at the tsena ura'ena. I don't even have the tsena ura'ena. And every week they would accuse him of reading the tsena ura'ena until finally one week the rabbi wanted to check out, what does it say in the tsena ura'ena? So, he looked to his right, he looked to his left, he found the tsena ura'ena, and he started learning the tsena ura'ena, and he got very engrossed. And just then one of the ladies walked into the shul, and he said, Rabbi, we told you, we know that you read the tsena ura'ena every week. Anyway, that's a joke, by the way. Okay. So you want to know, what if you don't understand Rashi? Reb Moshe Paskind, says Reb David Feinstein, that you could read Rashi in English. You could read Rashi in English. So, what you could do is you could buy an Art Scroll Rashi. There are 2 versions now. And you could read the Rashis in English. Anyway, The Dirshu, in the new Dirshu, he brings this letter from the Chofetz Chaim, and he says the Chofetz Chaim writes in Likutei Amorim, Shema shenagu likroi Shnayim Mikra Targum mishum she'al yidei zeh yisboinein b'mikra v'yitein es libay lahavin v'oz nechshav loy kalimod mikra shareim enoi mavin loy nechshav loy kalimod klal. If you don't understand it, then it's not considered learning. Okay, Rabbi say that's what we got today.
One of the that someone asked the Rosh Shiva Dal, he said like, should I do Targum or Rashi? He said do Targum. He said, but I don't understand that. He said, you do Targum, you do enough years, you end up knowing Targum, be able to learn Gemara. That for you ultimately be.
Is that true?
What?
Is that true?
I think a lot of the words.
Amnam kfar hoira hachofetz Chaim.
Yeah,
Yeah, Targum is a very interesting limud, by the way. There's a perush on Targum. The chumash I use, the big chumashim they used to give out in 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, chumash Rashi. I found, my friend Rabbi Glatstein Schwartz got it for me. There's a perush on the Targum on the bottom. The main perush on Targum is called Nesina Lager. Nesina Lager. And it was written by Nathan Marcus Adler. Nathan Marcus Adler. He was one of the chief rabbis in England, or he's the namesake of Rav Nosson Adler. That's the main commentary on Rashi. Every single Targum, he has pilpulim noiraim. Why Targum use certain words.
But now, Archel came out on Targum, so now you can just read the Archel version of, just read the Targum translate.
Translate the Targum.
Today there's a Shnayim Mikra get together in Brooklyn.
Tonight, yeah.
Tonight.
Yeah, ready?